Right. Good morning, everyone. We're here to inform you on our master. It's the Arts and Culture Master. And next slide. I'm Stijn Bussels. I'm the head of the Department of Art History and Arts and Culture. And I'm also the Professor of Art History. And this is Lara Kouters.
Yes, I'm the study advisor of this particular master's program.
So together we are trying to give answers to all the questions you have. But let me first introduce the master to you. Actually, there are two tracks in our masters. One is art history, the other one is museum studies. But in those two tracks, they're not separate. We always want to bring art history for people interested in the museum, or museum studies for the people with an art historical background. So it's always on the intersection. Every course in all of the tracks, the two tracks, both concentrate on that intersection between art history and museum studies. So we really focus on the art museum, but in a very diverse way. In September, so actually you can start two times in our program. You can start in September. Most of the people start in September, but you can also start in February. So if you start in September, you first have what we call the core course 1, and that is the critical perspectives in art history and museum studies. And you have two electives, so you can choose two seminars, and we already prepare you towards the thesis in the second semester, in which we call the thesis seminar. In the second semester, you have the core course 2, so that is the both tracks, also the core course critical perspectives, both tracks follow that course. That's the curatorial and art historical practices, and then you will write your MA thesis. In February, that goes upside down. So in that way that you start with what we call the core course 2, the practices of the museum and art history. In the second semester, you have what we actually call core course 1, because most of the people start, of course, in September, the critical perspectives in art history and museum studies. So in February, when you start in February, you also have two electives and a thesis seminar. That's just the same. And the MA thesis is then written in the first part of the second part of the, so from September onwards, let me say it like that. That's easier. All right. So those two core courses, how do they work? So that's the core course that everyone needs to follow. Now I'm teaching in that first core course, so the critical perspectives in art history and museum studies. And there we look at the most urgent subjects, most urgent ways of looking at art at this moment. For example, yesterday I was teaching about the post-human and how far can theories like Donna Haraway help us in order to understand not only contemporary art, but also to plunge in the past and look at art from, for example, Renaissance Italy. Post-human is such a kind of angle we want to use for art history, but also for museum studies, exhibitions, for example. Others are diversity, the post-colonial. So we're really looking at the most urgent matters in order to look in how far we as art historians or as future curators in a museum, in an art museum, can deal with that. That's our first core course. The second core course, the curatorial and art historical practices, that concentrates far more on the practice in the museum and in art history these days. At a certain moment, for 5 classes, we sit together with people from Leicester, and there we explore the digital and how far do we need as art historians or as curators use the digital, what are the most actual problems but also possibilities. Another part of that course is what we call the master classes. We invite people, curators working in the field, not only curators but also people working in, for example, library, in journalism. And we invite them, and students need to go into interaction with them, sometimes with an interview, sometimes really visiting their exhibition and looking how far that exhibition was built. Did it tell which story, for example? And that's what we call master classes. That's part of those practices. So we really want you to get a view on how you will end up in the working field and what your responsibilities will be. That's the core course 2 about. So if you start, and now I have to look at you, yes, if you start in February, this February, then you will have those electives, so you have to choose 2 out of the 3. There are less choices in the February cohort, in that way that if you start in February, since there are less people, you have less choices. If you start in September, there are far more choices for you to make, but these are the choices you will have to make if you start with us in February, which of course we would like a lot. So of course that core course 2, I just told you, the master classes, exploring the digital, and then the 2 electives. So you can have a choice between where we really look at art, science and technology, so in how far contemporary art did work interdisciplinary in the way that we do deal with, for example, biology, and in how far biology and the art has intersections, in how far also we can bring that towards a museum, towards an exhibition for a larger audience. That's that one. We also have the decorative arts. At Leiden, we have a very long and strong tradition of decorative arts. This is a curator, the head curator of decorative arts at the Rijksmuseum, who is teaching this course, and it concentrates not only on the decorative arts and, for example, what we call the biography of an object. So how did an object, for example, end up in a certain collection? So we are not only looking at the decorative arts themselves, but also at collecting and exhibiting those subjects. And then our last course you can choose is about cultural memory, and in how far museums and art explore cultural memory, with, of course, Berlin and its fantastic museums as a very good example for that. Maybe go back. Did I say everything?
I think so, yeah. So in the next slide you see the study guide. So that is the website that shows the program of this specific academic year. So if you're interested in courses from next year, they're not there yet. They will be from June. Mm-hmm. But it does give you a good overview of how the program works. You can actually see what the courses are about. So check that out, I would say.
Yes, indeed. Also to say that we always want to have courses as relevant as possible. That means that, for example, that core course 2 is now already in full development. We're asking the people of the museum at this moment really working there. So it's not that you will have the same course 2 years later. It's always really very, very urgent, very adapted to the here and now. All right, next slide. Yes, there we go. Just to give you some examples of theses, we thought that it's interesting to give you some ideas, because then you also know what we are interested in, what we deal with ourselves from our own expertise. So which people do we have in our team, and which people can help you with helping you, advising you in that thesis. Remembering is for us, memory studies is for us really interesting, because that is very often on the verge of helping people really going towards that audience in, for example, the exhibition. So remembering the unknown, intergenerational, transgenerational post-memory, for example, is such a interest that loads of the people from our staff have. For example, we also will have tomorrow, I think, someone from the Boijmans van Beuningen Museum. He will talk about in how far she worked as a curator of an exhibition on war art at the Second World War, how she did work with the collective memory, because she interacted and she really asked from the whole people of Rotterdam, to interact and respond to what they still remember of or their family, of course, their grandparents still remember of the war, and that interacts with an exhibition. Others is, for example, that was my thesis, or not my thesis, one of my students who made that thesis, neglect of Aztec art technology in European ethnographic museums. It's really a very narrow view that museums still have on Aztecs, and they most of the time present them as barbarous, and they killed and they offered people and things like that, and they try to really neglect their advanced technologies and how that works. That's another one. And then the 18th century fans, that was a great topic. So we also have many people from the early modern to advise you. Fragile nationalism, Russian porcelain, for example. So those decorative arts are very important for us. The environmental humanities are important for us. So in that way, how to exhibit environmental encounters. How COVID interacted with museum practices is of course also one of the topics we want to address and we need to address. The other one is the performing arts are important for us because that's also really bringing us towards the museum and in how far performing arts and the theater interact in the museum these days. Gendered subjectivities, of course, so for us that's also one. Gender studies is a very important interdisciplinary encounter, and then the Virgil translations is maybe a far more particular matter, but we are also very interested in the Nachleben, so what is from, for example, antiquity coming towards early modernity. It's also one of my specializations as a researcher. Something to add, Laura?
Not about theses.
All right, let's go to the next slide. There we go.
Of course, after you're done with us, because our program is only a year program, so it's 2 semesters, 2 half years, and then you're done with our program, hopefully. We also have a part-time version in which you take a year and a half.
Yes.
There are some careers that our students go into, so lots of our students do go into the culture field. So we have curators, we have collection managers, but I would advise you to be very creative, which is, part of this program anyway, being creative about what you can do afterwards. Mm-hmm. We teach you to be an art historian, we teach you to be someone who knows about museums, but not all of you will be in museums, but it is good to know that there are certain transferable skills that you will be taught during our program that are certainly very wanted in the career field. So you have some overview here. What is also good to know is that we have a Humanities career service. So if you have any questions during your program, you can always go there. And I imagine a lot of you have questions about an internship. Mm-hmm. You haven't seen that during our program overview. That is because the internship is not part of our intercurricular program. So you can pursue an internship, but it will be extracurricular because we have a lot of things to discuss during our 1-year program. And unfortunately, an internship within that is not a possibility for us. But you can do that, extracurricularly.
Yeah. And the good news is that we do have many curators teaching you. Yeah. So, for example, I just mentioned the curator of decorative arts at the Rijksmuseum, but we have many other curators also from, for example, World Culture, the Museum of World Culture, etc., etc. So they can help you towards an internship. So that's already a one-on-one relation. And with our core course 2, where you do give a masterclass, get a masterclass of people from the field, it's also exploring that network, and also there you can have that chance to get a chance to go into that internship. Internships are indeed extracurricular, completely right, but the thesis can be directly related to an internship in that way that for example, I did an internship previous semester, so that was starting in February this year actually, and there one of my students organized a wonderful exhibition on abstract art from the 80s, and she directly linked that to a thesis. So it is what she did in that exhibition helped her towards that thesis, and that's something we really encourage.
Yeah.
Next slide.
Yes.
Next slide.
So we also value diversity and inclusion at our university in general and our faculty. So what might be good to know for you is that we have a Humanities buddy program that is a buddy program specifically for international students. What we notice and what I notice as a study advisor is that lots of internationals come our way and then they suddenly get into a Dutch culture. We are a specific sort of culture. You have to get used to it, but just be open to it. And also the Humanities buddy program can link you towards another MA student, not necessarily from our program, but within the Humanities faculty, to help you get around our university and our country. We also offer support for students with a disability. So we have the Fenestra Disability Center. You can get some accommodations there. We have several student networks, but also a student advisory group for diversity and inclusion. So you find some of our student networks over there. If you're interested in joining them, you can always send them a message. I think within our program, as art historians and museum studies, students, we are very much aware of, diversity needing to be a big part of the education that we teach you. So
it's even absolutely explicitly addressed the inclusion forces, powers in the museum and in the arts. So that's also something that we really take as very interesting subject matter in order to take for study.
Yeah.
All right.
Should I help you with this
one?
Yes, so please. There are some application deadlines that you need to be aware of. So if you are wanting to start in the upcoming semester, so February 2024, and you are a student who needs a visa or residence permit, be aware within a few days, 10, you will need to fulfill your application. Yes. So start your application today, I would say. If you don't have a need for a visa or residence permit, you have an extra month. What might be good to know is that we require a language test, but if there is a hiccup there for you not to do the language test before in 10 days, don't worry. If you are admitted and you haven't fulfilled the language test yet, it will be on the condition that you hand in the correct language test before the start of the program in February. Yeah, and you can also see the September start deadlines there as well. Processing time is around 6 to 8 weeks. Please apply on time. And if you are a student from the BA Kunstgeschiedenis or Arts, Media and Society from Leiden University, you are directly eligible. So if you finish up your BA program, you can continue onwards in our program with any hiccups.
All right. And this is our website.
Yeah, this is our general website. And I think that was our talk. You can find my email address on the link there. So if there are any questions, we're going to do the questions now that we had in the chat. But if you have questions afterwards, you can still find my email address there. I can't answer all the questions, but I will try my best to answer to the best of my ability. All right.
Now we need the questions.
The questions, please. Yes.
There they go.
What kind of examination is the most common in your program?
Well, there are, of course, the usual suspect is to end with a paper, but we try to give some diversity on that paper. In that way that some of those classes that focus, for example, on the digital, we'll ask a digital outcome as well, for example, a website or a podcast or even a virtual exhibition is possible. So in that way, to give a brief answer, it is important that you are able to write well in a scientific way, so footnotes and all the things that belong to a scientific essay, scientific paper. So that's certainly something we learn, certainly because you also will have to do it in the thesis, but we're certainly aware that we also need to learn you other ways of expressing your knowledge. So we do have also other ways of doing that. Group work can also be, for example, but only part then of the assessment.
Yeah, and presentations are there as well.
Yes, right? Of course. Yeah. So maybe we most of the time we also work towards first a presentation or a pitch of your paper, your idea, and then a paper if it's that most classical way. But there are many alternatives as well.
Okay. Next question. Which subjects will be covered in the pre-master's program? That is a good question. And that is why I'm here. So the pre-master's program is a program that will be given to you based on your educational background. You can't apply for the pre-master's program directly. You apply for the master's program, and then the Board of Admissions decides whether you would perhaps be eligible through a pre-master's program. The pre-master's program is around 30 to 40 credits, and we try to make it one semester for you, and the courses that you will follow will be part of the BA Kunstgeschiedenis or the BA Arts, Media and Society, so our own art historical bachelor's programs. Which subjects will be covered is a bit difficult because the program is a bit flexible in the sense that the Board of Admissions really looks at your educational background and takes a look at what you miss. Some of you will miss more theory, some of you will miss more skills. So it's very difficult for me to say, this is the subjects that will be covered. But if you're interested in seeing what kind of courses you might be able to follow, take a look at the study guide, take a look at BA Art History, BA Arts, Media and Society, take a look at the first few years, and some of the courses will pop up during your pre-master's program if you are given it. So that's the pre-master's program. Can we expect big differences between a bachelor and a master's program?
Yes. Absolutely, absolutely. So of course we still have our staff with our own expertise. We still have our important points. So for example, we really highly value inclusion. We highly value the global and things like that. So those are the same, but every course is different, and we do certainly will address it on a higher level as well. So new subjects for sure, and courses on a higher level where we expect more of you in that way that you get far more involved. So most of the courses are seminars, so you have a very active role in that as a student. And for example, just to give you that example of those master classes, you will have to interview the museum specialist, the curator, for example, not us again, so not us any longer. So in that way, it's not only different as a way of the subjects we address, but also the way we teach.
Can I add something to that? Because
Yes,
what I also want to mention in that regard is that during a master's program, you are expected to be a bit more, maybe a lot more independent. So during your program, you will do 30 credits each semester if you are a full-time student. That doesn't mean that you are in a classroom for 40 hours a week. It means that you have around 9 hours maybe in class, and the rest of the time we expect you to work on your studies. So that means preparing the following course, preparing an essay or a paper or presentation. It is a lot more independent self-study, and I think some students underestimate how much it is, especially during your second semester. So during your second semester, you're most likely going to do a thesis, and a thesis during the bachelor is something that you will be much more helped by your supervisor through. And during a master's thesis, it is expected that you take the initiative, that you are the one taking care of keeping up the communication. Of course, your lecturers are very happy to help you with figuring out how to make it work, but it is up to you to make it.
Just to give you that example again of that internship. So it's you choosing that internship, and then you making the link between the internship and the thesis, of course, in direct interaction with your advisor.
Okay, so I've got two questions in this one. Is it possible for non-Dutch students to get one of the job prospects stated in the presentation? I assume that you mean job prospect in the Netherlands. What we notice in the Netherlands, so for internship specifically, is there are options for international students to pursue, but a lot of our institutions do ask for Dutch language skills.
Yeah, it's better now than a few years ago. But we do have possibilities for people not Dutch speaking, but indeed it is a challenge.
It's a bit more of a challenge, so you should be prepared for that. But what might be good to know, and is a bit maybe linked to what you're asking, the extracurricular internship, you can also pursue it elsewhere. So go abroad if there is a specific area that you're interested in and you find a art historical institution there who takes internship. Go there, because we are able to supervise those from abroad. But job prospects, they are there. I would be remiss to say that it is easy peasy for an international student, but it is a possibility. And the second one is the theme of the thesis limited to European-based museums? No. Or can students take themes for museums outside of Europe, for example, home country in Asia?
Absolutely, absolutely. So actually in Leiden, we are very strong for our global perspective. We started that pretty early, so in that way we had researchers who were dealing with the non-European, we called that in that day, because they thought that was the most interesting spot to do right now. And indeed, we do have our specialists of non-European based museums. So in that way, for example, we have a specialist in the Cuban Biennale, for example. She did research on that. So in that way, the Biennale in Cuba, I thought in Havana. So in that way, we also have our specialists from Latin America. We now have a professor special appointment of Africa Studies and Australia. So in that way, we do have people also able to advise you of museums outside of Europe.
Yep. All right. Next question. Ooh, it's not changing.
We can answer the same question again.
Yes.
There it comes.
What is the difference between this program and other art history studies in Amsterdam?
Yes, well, in Amsterdam you have art history and you have museum studies. What we want to do is really preparing art historians for the museum. So we really look at that important working field for the art historians. That's the biggest difference. But we also have that global perspective, which is less developed, for example, in Amsterdam or in other universities in the Netherlands and even beyond. Because this is quite unique that we have, that we all, in every course we offer in our MA, it's really on that intersection between art history and museum studies. And that's unique here in Leiden.
Thank you.
Yeah, that went quick.
How research focused is this program?
Yes,
Good question.
It's also just to take that previous question of the difference between the BA and the MA. The MA really concentrates on your own research, not only the own research of the staff, but also of the research that is now here at the moment being done. A week ago, we had a professor from Oslo, a very famous architectural historian, Mari Vattum, and she presented her research. So it's all about research-based teaching we are doing here. Yesterday, I presented my own research that I'm doing at the moment to the students in the core ones. So in that way, it is very focused on the research. However, what I also want to say is that the working field, what happens at the moment, for example, in the museum, also gets our focus. So it's a bit of what is really being done now at this moment in art history, but also what is really being done now at this moment in the museum.
Yeah, and I'd like to add to that is within the Netherlands we have a distinction between more practice-based education and more theoretical research-based education. So what you're looking at now is a master's degree at Leiden University. So we're very research-based. Mm-hmm. If you're interested in more fine art, so you want to be an artist in some way, practice-based education is probably better for that. So yes. That is HBO. And we have close ties with the KABK, which yes. is the Royal Academy of Art in The Hague. So be aware that if you're applying for our program, you will be a researcher.
Yes, it won't be.
And not necessarily an artist.
Absolutely.
We have some, extra courses that you can do in creative stuff, but it's not
but we don't
part of our program. And it's good to know that. Mm-hmm. Okay.
Oh yes, good idea. It was a question, but it's
gone.
No,
okay.
But the previous one. The previous one we get in because it was on the practice-based thesis and we didn't answer that yet.
Oh, it's gone. Sorry.
Student?
No.
Okay.
How do we arrange student housing from my current location abroad? Mm-hmm. Okay, so I'm going to be really honest with you. For international students, currently in the Netherlands, is really tough to get a place. And if you don't have a place before you start your program with us, please don't come to us. Because in my experience as study advisor, I get students in the first few weeks, who are very stressed, can't focus on their studies because they don't have a stable place. Now, what is good to do is once you have applied for our program and you've gone to the application procedure, and I would really recommend applying as soon as possible, is to already start looking. We have a housing office that can help you set up, a search, but it is something that the housing office only has so much space for international students, and early students might be able to get a spot. Mm-hmm. Other students are required to look for it on their own. So there are lots of Facebook groups and websites where you can go for specific housing searches, but it is up to you to arrange housing, and it is quite tough. I just want you to be very realistic in this. For example, what I usually say to those students who apply and get in but don't find housing on time, defer your studies for a later intake. So for example, if you're applying for February and you don't find any housing on time, defer your studies for September 2024. It gives you a lot more time to find a stable housing situation before you come to us. So that is a tip I would like to give.
We missed the previous question on the practice-based thesis.
Yeah, the word.
And that really went so quickly that we could not read it.
We're going to go on.
But it will come. It will come. All right.
All right. Are you recommended this program for background Bachelor of Architecture?
Yes, absolutely.
Yes, but I want to add to this is that the admission requirements that we have ask for a bachelor's background in either art history or a humanities-based one, or archaeology. Those are the more general people who get admitted to our program. Yes. People with a Bachelor of Architecture don't always get in, and that is because there are certain requirements, such as you have to have done art history within your bachelor. And for bachelor students with architecture in their background, it's not always the case that that is included. No. So on an individual basis, sometimes Bachelor of Architecture students get in, sometimes they don't.
No, that's right.
Yeah.
So some of those are really focusing on architectural history. Then most of the time it's really easy to get into the master. Others are really practical architecture. So it all depends on which which BA architecture really did. Sonia, there's your question again. Very good.
I think it was my question. Hello, Sonia.
You saved us.
So I'll try again. What are the criteria for a practice-based thesis variant?
Yes. So what are the criteria? We do want you to do something on that intersection between the museum and art. So if you're just going to, for example, doing a practice-based thesis on something you did in a natural history museum, that's problematic. So it needs to be on that verve. And then, indeed, what you learn from that internship. For example, most of the time, of course, the practice-based thesis, I have to start with that, focus on what a student learned during his or her their experience during an internship. That internship can, for example, help them in learning more about a certain theme. I just gave you the example of abstract art in the 80s, because that student made an exhibition on that period in art history, and then it can bring you that extra step towards the thesis. The difference between an internship and a thesis then is that in the internship you just give a report of what you did. The thesis really then needs that academic background, so you will have to put a very clear research question. You will have to work then with a status quaestionis, explaining how that research question refers to what is already studied. So it will be that more or less classical thesis, but it will start from what really happened there in the working field. I hope that's clear. If it's not clear, just type in a more particular question. But there was a second question too.
I know the second question. I read it. It's about the MA thesis procedure, and I know Sonia because she messaged me before. I know this question. I'll keep it in mind. This is a specific website that I should send you because it's on the student website, thesis and paper writing. But it might be a bit difficult for you to find. So I'll send it to you.
Oh, good. You'll get a link, Sonia.
Yeah. Noticed that most of the theses that we mentioned happened in the West. Mm-hmm. Is it possible to make a thesis about the Asian side?
Oh yes, for sure, yeah. We do have specialists from the Asian. We just give you some of the examples. Of course, honestly, this is, of course, in the Netherlands. So internship-wise, it's easier to start from, for example, an internship in a Dutch museum. But the thesis subject is certainly also possible from an Asian angle. Yeah. It all depends then, of course, if we do have the expertise. We do have people really working in, for example, contemporary art regarding to the Asian continent. We do not have specialists, for example, of, I don't know, early, let's say, for early Asian art. So there it will be more difficult. So it's all about the subject, but most of the time we can address the Asian continent.
All right. Does having a History of Art diploma, together with a Humanities bachelor degree and a museum-related work experience, help getting admitted to this master? Yes.
Absolutely.
I assume so, but it is difficult for us to say for sure, because this is just a line with words and we have to see the actual diplomas. Mm-hmm. It does sound like it's likely to get you help get admitted to this master, but we can't say for sure. So the only way you truly know is to apply for our program. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and Laura already made clear that it is a committee who really looks carefully at your curriculum. So what did you do before, and then decides. So it's very individual, this one, but it's very carefully taken into consideration.
Okay. Next one, is it possible to extend my studies easily? So this is depending on what kind of student you are. If you are a student without a visa, it's quite easy. So you can re-register for our program until you finished our program. It's not like you have to have finished by the 60 EC by the end and then you'll get kicked out if you don't. But you need to be aware of that you need to pay tuition fees in full again, even if it's just one course that you still need to follow. You have to extend all your administrative stuff. But if you are a visa student, it might be a bit more difficult, because there is a visa requirement for students who have a visa of having to have having to pass at least 50% of a year's worth of courses, meaning that we are a 60 EC program. You have to have 30 credits by the end of that year in order for you to possibly continue onwards your studies with us. If you don't have that 30 credits, there are certain ways to maybe get a way through. But the 30 credits requirement is something that we need to keep in mind for visa students. Absolutely. So is it possible to extend my studies easily? Yes, it kind of is. But in these situations, always come to me as study advisor, because I'm very knowledgeable about this as much as I can. You mentioned it is possible to do the program part-time. What are the circumstances that allow you to follow the program part-time? Well, your decision, basically. It's not up to us to make a decision on you whether you're doing it part-time or not. You can apply for the program part-time. Lots of students who do it part-time do it because they're doing a job next to it, or they have certain requirements outside in their personal circumstances that prohibit them from studying full-time. What might be good to know is that if you are a student studying on studiefinanciering, I think you need to be full-time student. So if you are not a full-time student in that situation, you will not get your studiefinanciering. So take a good look at what might be the best option for you. Basically whatever your decision is, and if you don't have a specific view, send me a message and I'll see what I can make of it. How hard is it to find an internship on my own as an international student? Is there some kind of convention about this?
We do have a website where we put all the possibilities of internship together. It was harder a few years ago to find an internship as a non-Dutch speaking student, so that was quite a challenge. It's better now. We do have our own staff people really helping you finding them. They also have their own networks and they also help you in finding them. So you just go to that particular staff member and you can start talking about. You quickly will learn his or her specialization, so in that way you can work towards that. We do have those courses, such as the core course 2 with a masterclass, where you also really meet people from the field. So in the break or afterwards, you can also address them and ask them for possibilities. And there are, for example, also in Leiden many museums who offer internships. So in that way, you can just drop by. It's just 5 minutes walk from our campus to all those museums. So in that way, there are loads of possibilities. It is always your own initiative. So it's you finding an internship. It's not us offering dozens of internships, but we do group them together on the website, and we do have a staff with a very rich network of people that can help you in offering that internship. But in the end, it's your responsibility.
Okay. I'm considering doing a double master's program. Would you say the program of the MA Arts and History and Museum Studies lends itself to that? And if not, what are the possibilities? I would say that the MA Art History and Museum Studies is a program that is so closely intertwined that a double master's program doesn't make sense. Also, you wouldn't do a double master here. It would be one master's degree with 2 tracks. But I think it's not possible because there's a lot of overlap. Like, we have 2 courses that are completely the same for both programs. So it doesn't make sense to do the double track. But of course, it is very possible that you find a MA elsewhere, for example, in the Faculty of Humanities. And if you're interested in doing that, reach out to me, because we have lots of students who combine their art history or their arts and culture masters with another master. So, for example, I've had students who did the MA Arts and Culture and do the MA Book and Digital Media Studies, or the MA Arts and Culture and the MA Asian Studies. And that is also an enrichment of your experience within arts and culture, I think, because it gives you, extra information that you might not specifically find in arts and culture, but you can get elsewhere. Yeah.
Yes, fully agree.
Are there scholarships possible? Yes. So scholarships, if you're interested in that, please go to the website. So there is a website with all the information about scholarships. One of the scholarships that I know off the bat is the Leiden Excellence Scholarship. And that is given to specific students with, a specific amount of grades or average of grades. It's a tough scholarship to get into. But there are scholarships available. You have to apply for them. And it's not necessarily that we have an arts and culture scholarship. That's not the case. So there's, nationwide or university-wide scholarships possible. Yes. Are there staff members in the program that focus on accessibility in museums, for example, from museum studies? I do the Bachelor AMS and accessibility has been mentioned there, but I feel like it tends to be limited and I would be interested in that.
Yeah, I totally understand. We did have a staff member once who was looking at deaf people and visiting the museum, because most of the time it's of course blind people who are studied in their accessibility. We do no longer have that staff member amongst us, so we do not have a very specific staff member who focuses, but you're right, already in our own Bachelor AMS we did focus on accessibility. Accessibility is part of course, diversity and inclusion interests of us, but we do not have a staff member who is explicitly working today at the accessibility. That's not the case.
Those were all the questions that we had.
Good. Thank you very much. Loads of questions.
Wow. Thank you. If you have any questions left, send me a message on that email address that you've seen before. You can find me on the website. If you Google MA Arts and Culture, Leiden University, you'll find me anyway. But do reach out and apply on time. I would really recommend apply today if you're interested, to make your admission application procedure a bit more quick.
Yes,
and hopefully we'll see you.
Absolutely looking forward to welcoming you to Leiden. Bye bye.